I need something that provokes me to think about it. I don't just go into boundaries with like, okay, here's the roadmap. And this is this quote that I said the other day, and I'd been thinking it in my head for days and days and days. And it said, pay close attention to those who disguise control as setting boundaries, yet see any boundaries placed on them as an attempt to control. That's my provoker. Because then I start to think about, okay, the push and pull, the tug of war of boundaries. Not many relationships, and you guys may differ from this, but a lot of relationships I've seen, been around, it's not that simple with boundaries. It's a very contentious thing. And what I mean by that is one thing doesn't apply to the other.
Well, where do we get our view of what a boundary is? Like, I don't remember other than somebody randomly bring it up. It's a word that's not said very often. And for context, like, I have a bunch of boundaries in life, but anytime I've heard anybody else use the word boundary, it's usually when they're going through something traumatic and it's not even used in the right context. So where do we get our frame for boundary?
Or they don't have boundaries and they're trying to establish them too late into their life kind of thing.
Well, I'd say to get started, everybody has boundaries. Some people don't dictate their own. Because if you don't create boundaries for your life, boundaries are put on you, period.
Right.
You're under the control of other people's wishes, their wants, all the things.
Well, and from what I've seen as you get later in life, guys, and it could be earlier too, but I see it later in life only because once we get later, people have experienced life. There's baggage. There's trauma. And so when I sit down and talk to people, and I'm going to be in this one too, it's hard to give or receive boundaries when the reason why that boundary is set is it's got something hanging on it, right? What I mean by that is it's a completely fine boundary, Thad, for your wife to say, hey, I would really appreciate it if you didn't like posts on Facebook that are only women and that are kind of inappropriate in nature. Not because I don't trust you, but because other people might see you liking that and get the wrong idea.
Yeah, I think that the challenge there, like I wrote this framework out earlier, Bryan, a healthy boundary is a clear, communicated limit that protects your emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being without controlling others. The basis of breakdown in communication is coming to Thad and saying, I need you to stop doing this because it makes me feel X. Now I'm using the word boundary, but I'm controlling your action. Versus in a marriage coming together and say, hey, can we sit down and have a conversation about how we interact on social media and how we interact with the opposite sex?
And I would think, and again, this is going to be a place where I'm just I'm searching this topic myself, but I think that if that was to happen, what would be important is for her and you guys in this conversation, if you were having it, it would be presented in a way to where, hey, it's not that you've done anything. It's not that I don't trust you. I just want us to be in sync on why we're doing this. It's two ways. It's a thing that goes back and forth. It's not this, you have to do this because of that. You know what I mean? Because that doesn't sound like a boundary anymore as much as it sounds like an order. And for men on this deal, and again, when we have these conversations, and I think you guys agree, we're always trying to talk about the best assumed situation. We can't touch every single, the 20%. 80% of men, I think, if they were to have a healthy conversation with someone that they cared about, and it went kind of like, hey, I want us to design some boundaries that we have on social media together that we both stick to, most men are going to say, okay, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But I also would say all those men would have a kind of an issue with a female that is liking posts, right? She's liking posts, but she's going to come to you saying, hey, you're not going to be doing that. I don't want you to do this, so you can't do that. That's not fair or healthy.
So again, and I think when I unpack this big time later, we're talking about an actual boundary, and we're talking about misrepresenting a boundary in order to have control. They're two different things. So let me set a healthy boundary outside of a male-female relationship or relationship. That's where it gets sticky. So I've had times in the past where, hey, there's a bachelor party coming up.
Okay.
And the bachelor party's at a strip club. And so I was like, hey, guys, what are you doing after? Say, I don't go to strip clubs. I didn't say you can't go to a strip club. I'm protecting my emotions, my heart, my eyes in the way that I perceive that I value women. But I'm not saying, hey, you can't because I'm not going to. That's no longer a boundary. And I know it's a pretty like off the wall one, but that's a pretty clear one. I had a buddy a long time ago. We'd go hang out before I found Christ and tons of drinking. Everything's fine. He'd set up a laptop and start streaming porn. And I was like, hey, bro, I was like, that's going to play. I said, I'm going to bounce. I didn't say you had to shut it down. I just said there's not going to be streaming porn in a room that I'm in. So I can choose to leave. I don't have to put my actionable steps protecting me on another person because at that point, it's no longer a boundary.
Right. I think to have healthy boundaries in your life, you got to understand who you are. You got to understand who you are, like, in Christ as well. The verse that's kind of coming up to me is Galatians 2:22, like, I've been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me kind of thing. So because you know who you are in Christ, Kellen, you can confidently say, like, yes or no appropriately to situations.
Yeah, it's
when boundaries come up.
It's definitely helped with what I would call my guidelines. But you hit the nail on the head. Like, if I'm defining boundaries, and so I've had the realization that my boundaries are things that protect my mental, emotional, and spiritual sake. That's what a boundary is. So it's not placing it on somebody else. The first thing is to define what matters to me in my life, for my health, for my family, my well-being. What are those areas that actually matter? And what does that look like? That's a good, healthy first step.
Yeah. And I think that also, like, just going down the road on that, we can't do things at the expense of our own health or our own calling in terms of boundaries. Like, we can't love other people if we're not, like, feeling like healthy mentally to do that kind of thing.
Well, and to that, I made this note, like, before that started, to that, because we started off by talking about if you don't set boundaries, you still have boundaries, but they're set by other people and what other people want, their time frames, their emotional desires, which they can have those. But if I don't have boundaries, I'm going to say yes to everything.
Right.
And a lot of people have trouble saying no because they don't have clarity on what they want to say no to. So if you don't decide what matters, someone else needs, dysfunction, and expectations will shape your schedule, energy, priorities, and even your identity.
Well, and that right there is what I'm hearing is boundaries being used as a tool to manipulate, not a tool to protect the relationship. You know what I mean? And in fact, a tool to protect the relationship would still be something we discussed. Even if this one's so tough, because a lot of times we can start to talk about boundaries from a place of guilt. You know, this boundary is in place because so-and-so did this thing. That gets tricky. So we've got relationships where someone had maybe had some form of inappropriate behavior or cheating, okay? So the other person is going to want to maybe set some boundaries that protect the relationship in their mind. That's what it's doing. I'm almost starting to see this still, Kellen, is even though that person was inappropriate, if we've had reconciliation, we've had forgiveness, you still are going to be very hard pressed to set a rule style boundary on someone and there still be like harmony in the relationship. Does that make sense? Like, if there's been forgiveness and reconciliation, we're both leaning in saying we're going to figure this out, you still almost have to go about boundaries the same way as if it didn't happen that way. I would still think that the best plausible way to get a good result is going to be to come together, discuss the issue, and say, hey, I want you to know that the reason why I feel like I need this boundary is because of what happened in the past. But I need your buy-in. I want you to see what it means to me for it to be there. Well, if you have been the person involved in behavior that you shouldn't have, you can then begin to talk and communicate about how you can do that. I agree. That would mean, we've talked about this before, is sometimes you have to apologize for something you did a bunch of times.
Oh, for sure. Well, or you can decide. So again, it's your boundary. You can decide. So a lot of relationships, and even ones that last, there can still be some deep wounds from multiple patterns of other people. And so that's baggage you carry in a relationship, but you can still decide on a healthy conversation to have empathy for that person and be like, hey, if that's a concern, you can have access to my phone, or that's still me setting my boundary. Mm-hmm. My boundary is, hey, here's where my limits stop, but my phone's not for you. Now that I have clear understanding, I can decide to turn that over to you because it's still my boundary. When I say something like, well, I need access to your phone, that has nothing to do with boundaries. And that's how trauma triggers present themselves. Mm-hmm. In order for me to feel this way, you must do this. In order for me to be safe, I can't talk to you. In order for this to happen, you can't talk to Thad anymore. Those are manipulations of a boundary using the right framework and language, but they're not boundaries, they're control.
So here's a real scenario I'll give you guys. I know someone that had engaged in inappropriate behavior, okay? There was communication, reconciliation, progression moving forward, okay? The boundary from one person was, because of these things you've done, because of the patterns in your past, I need full access to your phone. But that same behavior, that same access was not reciprocated. So I start to look at that and think, like you just said, that sounds like a boundary, but it's almost disguised. It seems manipulative, because if we're saying we're going to press forward, we're going to work through this, that communication still needs to be, hey, I think what's best for us is that we're transparent and that we give each other access to each other's phones, because that's what we should do, instead of it being because of what you did, that pattern. But it sounds fair, right, Kellen? It sounds fair if you just talk about it, but you just kind of said this. It's disguised.
Yeah, and I think
it's the right word, disguised
as
for the process.
Manipulation.
But again, it always is putting something on someone else. Boundaries don't put something on. So again, if in order for me to feel safe, you have to, it's no longer a boundary. Now I can come into relationships and set an expectation and set a boundary that says, hey, if I'm going to get into committed relationships here from what I've gone through, here's what I need to be able to see. Because without seeing that, I can't trust. Now I'm fully exposed. It has nothing to do with Thad, right? So I didn't come at you, Thad, and say, hey, we're in this relationship now, and if you don't turn this over, I feel this, I can't trust. No, that's not me owning my past, my baggage, or my triggers. And that's what happens the majority of the time. It's everybody. So if you're listening to this and you've been through this is really common without, again, hey, two people going, what is a boundary? What is the definition of a boundary? How will I respond to those? How am I going to set those up in my life? And going back to the fact, it is so important to set those boundaries up, because if you don't, and a lot of people will relate to this, you say yes to a ton of stuff you shouldn't, because you haven't defined what's important in your life. Now, relationships go, I can share. Tara and I were dating, and I'd had a mess of relationships. I hadn't dated somebody in a year and a half, and we got a little bit intimate, standing just a little bit close, and nothing that anybody would consider anything. And I just stopped and I said, hey, I'm not having sex. Like, that's where I was at. And she was like, well, that wasn't going to be an option. Like laugh. That was her boundary for herself. But I didn't say, you're not going to make me have sex.
Right, it was unstated from her at first.
And it was from the beginning.
It was clear and communicated.
In relationships right now, until certain things, I don't have sex, period. That's my boundary. I don't go to strip clubs. I don't stay out because my past, well after midnight, and, because I've learned it's unhealthy for me to be out that late. That's just my personal boundary. So it's all about what I'm doing for me to be the healthiest version of me for others.
I think if you want to have healthy boundaries as well, you got to have clear communications and clear expectations of yourself and of other people. And you just got to tell people that, because unstated expectations leads to just heartbreak most of the time.
It does.
Anger,
and
frustration.
I think if anybody's listening, that's the gift you can give yourself right now. That if you haven't, with a partner, so if you're dating somebody or married, if you haven't sat down and identified what's important to each of you, if you haven't set great expectations, that's a big cause of where you're at. And so it's not just you, right? Because we have dysfunction and we blame, but we really feel shame. That goes back to the shame episode, that you can go, hey, I didn't have a healthy process for this. So what do you think about going back to the beginning and talking about expectations and what's healthy for each other and having an open, honest conversation where we don't bring the other person into our feelings or what's important for us?
Well, I think what I notice about boundaries the most, and being a complete rookie on them, like I've already said a couple of times, I mean, we're getting into boundaries today, not because I was super excited to talk about something that I don't do well, but I think that what's important to talk about stuff you don't do well is it starts the conversation. I mean, a lot of times what happens when we're not good at stuff, we don't talk about it. We don't perform at it. We don't do it. And no matter what it is, like if you'd never played volleyball, Thad, and I was like, hey, do you want to come play on our volleyball team Saturday? You're not going to try it. This is the same practices. I say, you know what? I'm not that good at that. Let's start talking about it. Because my experience around boundaries in watching and living is going to be a lot around boundaries being placed on people because of things that have happened in the past. Well, when those things add up and stack up, what ends up happening is you don't really feel freedom to do or operate in any way possible because of a trigger that you weren't even a part of.
Yeah, and what you're ultimately doing there, Bryan, is because of what I've learned in the past, because of hurt, I have to put every person in the same bucket. And moving forward, I'm implementing states of control and walls. So, a boundary is not a wall. It's things that I put in place for myself so that there's peace. And so if I put walls in place and I put expectations on other people, what I'm actually doing is trying to protect them and me, specifically me, because of trauma from the past. And so that's where it can get pretty wacky and controlling, even if the person doesn't know that's what they're doing. And a lot of times they don't.
Well, and we're not saying there doesn't need to be accountability. I think there does need to be accountability. I think that it's just very important, like the quote that I mentioned earlier, it's very important to be able to distinguish between what are we discussing together as a boundary for our relationship and what are you applying to me as a rule to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And that's tough because the other person is probably going to be able to make a logical and somewhat understandable argument of why they want that in place. Thad, I don't want you messaging people on Facebook because of what you did a couple years ago. It's fair. It sounds fair. But what ends up happening is now you're not allowed to do something. I would like to hear that, and again, I could be wrong, but I would like to hear that more set down in a conversation where it's like, hey, Thad, I've forgiven you. I know we've reconciled, and you don't do this stuff like you used to, but I still feel a little bit uncomfortable with the thought of you messaging people on Facebook. How can we approach this to where I can feel safe with you and I can continue to build trust with you? That is you helping establish a boundary that protects the relationship versus being told you can't do something. Because what I struggle with being told you can't do something is all of a sudden everything that's like that you can't do. So you can't text anyone, you can't email one, you can't call anyone, you can't message anyone. All of a sudden now you can't even operate. How do we figure out getting to a place of transparency? I would say it's more something like it's not that you can't do said thing. Like you said it earlier, if you've come into a relationship with Christ, one, you should already know better than to be doing something inappropriate. You are changing, you've changed, you're not doing that anymore. I have to begin to trust that. Number two, if I have full transparency with you to where I get to see everything that you're doing because you agree to give me that, I feel like that boundary is fair in that situation versus you can't do this. Because what I see from people, guys, when people are told they can't do stuff is they end up sneaking around. I mean, I don't want to admit that, but that's what I see.
Yeah, and that's hard because you really, because we're just hitting on relationships, right? Because there's boundaries in all areas of life, but in a relationship, you're not in every season going to be in the same place the other person is. Even if you both, claim the same religion and beliefs and things, you can still be in a different season than the other person. So you really have to actively listen and figure out where the other person is. But you were talking about, I can see where it leads to this. So the Bible says in Matthew 5:37, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one. So if I'm giving in because I feel pressure, it's not a yes. That ambiguity is not healthy. Right. And so if I understand, so I'll take my wife, for instance. Let's say my wife's been through some stuff with a couple relationships, and they were secretive on social tools, right? Or on text messages. And she just shared that with me and said, hey, would you mind us talking about how we communicated with the opposite sex? I said, sure. And we do that. And I feel that because of her wounds, it would just give her peace to do those things. And I say, yes, like get access to my iCloud to look at my text. All of our social media accounts are linked, by the way. My wife sees everything in half the time because we have the same accounts, the text flow to a common feed. I don't care. I love it because it keeps me super in a healthy place because I know those things go on. But that's for me. But in that scenario, because of the information I had and how I feel, my yes is yes. It's not, it'd probably be better for the relationship. There's no ambiguity. It's either a no or a yes. And I believe if people can get that if we're not giving in, because there's a measure of control there, from what we're hearing, then you won't have those things that are allowing you to really gather up some bitterness. Because over time, you're going to be resentful.
Yeah, no, you're gonna build up resentment.
Yeah.
And once you get into that resentment stage, that resentment kind of cycle, it's way hard to get out, because to dig in and start to clear up resentment, you've got to have discussions you do not want to have, and you've got to say things you don't want to say. This boundary thing is so crazy because I believe you could ask 10 people about boundaries and get probably 10 different-ish answers.
100%.
And it's going to be based a lot on their experience around receiving boundaries on them.
100%.
You know what I mean? Almost nobody's going to give us their opinion based upon boundaries they've set. It's almost always going to be what's been set on them. And that's intriguing to me because when I start to think about boundaries, if it's presented on a platform in a church service, which is rare, but if it's presented in some kind of a counseling boundary, a meeting with counseling, or with some type of relationship guru or some type of a program, boundaries are supposed to be this winning play for your relationship, for friendships, for life. But it almost always seems that people experience them negatively versus it being a winning play for you to run in your life.
Well, it's a winning play for you. I mean, that's what people have to understand. And we're not claiming, Brene Brown wrote an incredible book on vulnerability, and she has a lot of resources on boundaries. Yeah. And that's somebody you can go to. I mean, she's probably been in this specific topic for years. We're wanting to scratch the surface, and really, I'm wanting to hammer down selfishly in this podcast. This is a definition of a boundary. Through my men's ministry, through the counselors that I'm affiliated with, through the counseling I've been through, a boundary is for you. If it's put on another person, it's no longer a boundary. You can call it what you want. It's a rule. But it's manipulation. Point, yeah. If I'm using something healthy for self and putting it on somebody else to twist something, it's manipulation. And at its worst, it's control. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, because of triggers and trauma, just to be real, we've put those things in place subconsciously because we feel like it makes us and everybody else safe. And so it goes back to the need for counselors. It goes to the need for a conversation. We need to have a conversation around forgiveness and the need to say what needs to be said in the best way possible so you're not harboring things. We went over that with guys to guys, but really in relationships, you've got to find a way or an agreement if you're in a relationship to say what needs to be said with a third party or a safe place in a room so that you're not harboring bitterness. If I have resentment towards my partner that I see day in and day out, it's just going to get worse. And that needs to be something for you. Don't let that kind of stuff stand in the relationship. And that is on you to figure out a way to communicate it because it's your own deal. You're the one harboring the resentment. You're the one harboring the bitterness.
Yeah, and I think clear communication sets up expectations for people. And I also think it just lets trust flow freely. It's if you're clear in what you say and what you take in, the trust is going to be there really quickly.
With boundaries, and again, I've already established myself as the rookie on them, but I start to think through situations.
You said boundaries a lot.
Well, I get a little bit insecure about boundaries because I think that I also have a very blurry view of them because of how they've been used in my life. And then I have to take responsibility, which I did at the beginning of this, with not knowing how to also use them. But I'll think of it, this scenario right here is someone speaks to you disrespectfully, with a lot of just it's not pleasant conversation. So you then respond to that person in same fashion. Now, I'm not talking about right now if that's okay. Mm-hmm. Should you have? Maybe not. But you did. You responded with the same type of dialogue and energy that they had. Now that other person says because of their boundaries, they're no longer going to speak to you. That's manipulation. They got to say whatever they wanted, however they wanted to say it, but as soon as they had to receive the very same in return, they weren't interested in that. That's where I think back of that quote. You've got to be careful with those people. Those people have already decided they're going to manipulate and control everyone in their way.
Yeah.
That's scary to me because I even did this chat GBT on this emotional boundaries, protecting your feelings and not taking responsibility for someone else's emotions. When I hear that, what I hear in that is that, and I read, it tells me that it's not my responsibility to take on the heaviness and the pressure because of how someone else reacts to reality.
Yeah.
It's reality.
Well, if I'm around somebody and there's constant conflict, or I'll make the scenario easier. So I'm around somebody and I used to smoke all the time. And they love to smoke and they love to continue to ask me if I'd like a cigarette. Right? Say, hey man, I just don't smoke. And so I want to hang out here, and that's where I leave it. I don't have to put anything on you. I don't smoke. And they'll be well aware that that's what they want to do, and they can do whatever they want. That's the key.
Yeah.
But I'm going to create some distance, and I'm not going to say I'm creating some distance because of you. I'm just going to say, hey, I don't do this. Or somebody asks, you haven't responded to my, quotes on social and this and that. And I have a lot of people that I care deeply for. And they'll run into those media lines where people spend millions of dollars to talk about a thing through the news and social media, and you get on your friend and that's all they're responding to is whatever they watch that day. And I'm like, man, I love content that builds you up, and I speak about what I'm for. And so I stay away from content that's not like that. And that says all it needs to that's just my thing.
Well, I've got another one for you that got, someone mentioned this to me the other day when I said, hey, we're toying with this one. And this was actually from a female, believe it or not, because what you're about to hear would be the reverse of a lot of people that we know.
Yeah, normally in a relationship.
Not in all relationships. I would just say people we know.
Okay.
Because the people, I hear a lot of the other scenario, but people we know, this would be the opposite. So she says this, my partner, my husband's not that interested in going out and seeing his buddies or doing much. I am. I need it. Well, what happens is the boundary that I get is that it's never convenient for me to do it because it's not important for him to do it. Dude, that sounds like control to me. Here's why. It's not important to him to do it, but it is important to her. Well, since it's not important to him, he's figured out a way to make it inconvenient for her to ever feel freedom to do it. We're too busy. We got stuff going on. We need to be at home. What about family time? It's weird all of a sudden now family time is a thing and you're no longer allowed to go do this other thing, but you can do plenty of other things as long as I'm comfortable with it. So are you tracking with me? What's happening is this guy is telling her, no, he's not ever saying you can't do it. He's just making you feel like you can't do it. Have you guys done that? Like, I'm very familiar with that feeling. Not being told no, but definitely knowing we're talking about a no here. Because if I do this, I'm going to lose time. I'm going to lose peace. I'm going to lose time. So I know it's a no. That's what's happening here. Is it's important to her. It's a love language to her to be able to go see her friends and do something maybe once or twice a month. But it's not important to him. And so since it's not important to him, he's saying, I don't think we need to make time for this.
Yeah, and I think that's hard, right? I mean, because in that depth of connection and that relationship, the right answer really, truly is communicating well, that you're going to go do something ahead of time, right? And go hang out with your friends. And if that person starts to be triggered or mope or do it, let them. That's now their thing that they're doing. But again, you started in a really healthy place. It's not for me to take somebody else's trigger or their emotional state and wear it as a book bag. That's not what life's about. And if anything, to help that person stop doing that, I need to continue to call them by name and show up as my best self. Well, if we're both pulled down together, I can't do that. Another way of attacking this, when we go to what Thad talked about was, hey, the first thing to do, we're talking about boundaries and you're hearing this and you realize you're in that situation, go back to yourself, spend some time and look at you and your goals and the way you used to dream, the things you love to do, the fitness that you need to have, what you want to eat, what hobbies you want to have, and make a list. And then share that with the other person.
Well, I'll tell you guys, it is a very tough place to be when you're in a relationship or partnership with someone that every part of the world is designed around their comfort zones, their triggers, their traumas. And I get it. The simple answer is what you just said. It's going to be this way, and we've got to be healthy, and we've got to do these things. But I'll tell you guys, there are people listening right now. I know of a couple for sure that were like, I want to hear this. I want to hear this crap because I'm struggling. But guys, when you start to do that, okay, and now you guys, you, Thad, you're a younger married couple. I don't think you've experienced a tremendous amount of issues. I'm sure you've had some, but we're early in the game, and you do a good job, and she does a good job. And then, you've had a good relationship, but you've experienced some stuff in the past. But I don't know if you guys can relate to this one exactly. But when you begin to do the thing that you just said is healthy, right? You lose peace. If you're in a situation with the ones I'm familiar with that I know about and I'm hearing about from people is, Bryan, I get it and I hear it and I want to be better. But dude, what do I do when I'm about to lose every evening of my life in the peace that I want to have if I set any boundary whatsoever to protect me from that? And then all of a sudden what I do is like, fine, I'm just going to give into this. And as long as I keep catering to their emotions and their feelings, things are okay. The problem is they're not. It's stacking.
I'm about to say the hardest thing that everybody's going to hear on this podcast, including you.
Are we going to have to edit it?
No, not this time. If you're in that scenario and you do something to represent yourself healthily and do it the right way, and it causes what you're talking about, you've been a part of the problem the whole time. You've allowed the relationship without having boundaries for yourself to get where it's at.
From the get-go.
From the get-go. And then the lie that you just presented, and it is a lie, that if I just go along with this, because there's already suffering. I mean, the diminishing of somebody else's hopes and dreams and really living life like they were created to live it is not living. And so, but the healthy frame there is, and I'll give you one that's even harder. There's a guy that, got hurt by the church, went out and started going to strip clubs and just got caught up in him. And his wife's just broken down. She finally went to a counselor. He's been doing it for 3 years. She is a part of the problem. She did not represent or value herself enough 3 years ago to do anything.
Yeah.
It escalated. She is in the middle of allowing this to happen because even for him, it's a terrible thing. And so representing yourself in a healthy way, the best healthy way you can, and talk to somebody first and taking a stand is the best thing for you and the other person in a lot of these scenarios. And also realize if I'm 3 years in or I'm to that point, we've created together with me not having the right view of myself and not speaking up, we've created a valley. And so there's an uphill climb to get out.
Right. And this guy's gone out, now likely latched onto an addiction. So he's in a place to where not only is he being impulsive, he's probably finding himself in some addictive behavior that's going to be a challenge to battle out of.
Bro, and the root all of it, right? You go back to this thing, talking to a guy at Band of Brothers, the root of this whole mess isn't the strip club. It's that he had somebody, because he never had a dad on a pedestal, and that pastor failed, and he never talked to anybody about it, including his wife. In the same way the pastor failed, he was so white shoe, white tie for this pastor that poured into him, that he gets out and just starts being reckless because he never shared his heart from the beginning.
What would have been? Are we showing up on that?
Oh yeah,
We got a whole view
and you got people replying.
and a whole view. Awesome. Okay. And we'll get to some questions soon. I want everyone to understand we're likely going to have to get into this for a little while. Boundaries is tough. But I start to think about one of the questions I would have if I just heard your scenario, Kellen, would be, dude, how do I stop my freaking husband from going to the strip club? What am I supposed to do? I would think, for me, and I'll give you guys the rookie response before you tie it up, is at minimum, if this is happening, I would think it's time that if you don't feel like you can have this conversation, you then make it, hey, we've got to go bring someone into this.
Yeah.
I'm not condemning you. I'm hurt. I'm very hurt. I'm jealous. I'm feeling jealousy for sure. But if you're going to get out of this deal, letting that guy know how bad he is ain't going to work.
No, he's already spiraling out.
You're going to have to plead with the Lord for grace to come out of the way you react, and that you can share your from a healthy way, that you're jealous, that you're hurt. How do we get through this? Well, we've got to get someone involved.
You do, and you can't force the other person to go get somebody involved. You can represent yourself. You can go get expert guidance, and you should in that situation, especially if you're the wife, from a counselor. You should get boundaries around trauma, because that is trauma put on somebody else. You're going to have to take the right steps, and then over time, that wife is going to have to realize, because she didn't represent herself or see herself as valuable 3 years ago and say something, it got to this point. So she's going to have a role to play maybe years down the line if it gets that healthy. But there's a lot of trauma there. And it's all because, the best thing that we can do sometimes for other people is represent ourselves from the beginning, which is why it's so important for you to know your worth and to write out what's truly important to you. Because if all that stuff happens from the beginning, most often, unless stuff's really, really hidden, right, it doesn't get to this point.
Well, and I know some situations right now to where what you just said, so golly, guys, this is where boundaries, you said it early on, disguises itself. I know right now of a couple situations where someone would believe they were doing exactly what you just said. They were standing up for themselves. They were setting boundaries. But if you were really to turn the page over and look at the little small writing, it was control. There wasn't a boundary set. It was a set of rules that you will follow if you are doing this right. If you're a Christian man, Kellen, and you love the Lord, you would be doing this. That's tough for me. Because now when you start to try to bring a certain amount of condemnation in and say that I'm not doing something that I should be doing if my relationship was real with the Lord, that's getting tricky for me, because likely the boundary you just said doesn't have anything to do with the Word.
No, and here's the deal. When it comes to relationships, like, we're all toddlers. One of the coolest things that was ever taught to me when my son was like 3, and Tara and I felt like we were doing a horrible job of parenting, I got with this older guy that was kind of mentoring us, and we were being super hard on ourselves. And he gave us, 2 pieces of advice, and it just blew our minds. How simple, but how profound. And their kids are fully raised, starting to have kids, right? This guy's now a grandpa. And he's like, hey, how many years have you guys, raised kids? And we're 3. He's like, well, how old are you? 35-ish, whatever, right? And he's like, no, you're 3. He's like, you don't have any wisdom in that area. Same for relationships. If we don't intentionally go seek out the people that have dedicated education and a majority of their professional career to understanding these conversations and how to navigate, we're blessed. One of the craziest things, so my wife and I got real active in the church. I got saved. She walked with God for a long time, came back, and you talk about feeling like you don't deserve somebody. And so I was just so excited about everything, knew nothing. And I was doing the best I could to read and just do the right things, right? And we were so involved. Somebody's like, you don't need premarital counseling. Like, there's an event coming up. We listened to them. A decade later, 10 years later, we dig into some marital content, and we're going to start helping couples. And within like 2 weeks of just digging into this book that's incredible, we're like, oh my God, we've been missing this for 10 years.
Right.
Because what it did was help us, because we never had the proper framework for healthy communication. We didn't fully understand where each other grew up, the frame of mom or lack of mom or dad, what others have done. This thing walked through all that, and we could better understand each other without even talking. We had better frames which to start conversations from, and we had expert framework with pieces of accountability that both of us knew we were breaking if we broke it.
Well, I think this would be a really good place to let people know. Number one of the very best solutions that you can have in a relationship, especially around boundaries, is going to be immediately and yesterday set up an appointment and include someone in the conversation. Don't do it on your own. Don't try to work this out, especially if there's any amount of tension and conflict. Let's make this thing as safe as it can be, and let's sit down with somebody. Let's get a plan written out that we can both find success in, that we can both have ownership in. If you find that when you sit down to establish some boundaries for your all's relationship that you're running into walls, make the appointment. Make an appointment, because a good counselor, we would prefer a faith-based situation. You're going to find that the winning game plan for that is established much easier than it is with you trying to wrestle over this thing you want to convince them to be important to them. Tiffany, you said there was some questions. I don't see why we can't at least start to talk about a question or two here.
It's a little more than more comments.
Okay.
Ashley Brown has a lot of good comments. She's talking about honesty from the beginning. You can't really start a boundary conversation without being honest up front.
Well, and Kellen kind of touched on that a while ago, right? I mean, his scenario with strip club guy was, had wife said right from the get-go, this bothers me, I'm not okay with it, I'm uncomfortable with it, that's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, and people are going to hate hearing this. Ears are going to catch on fire when I say this. If you don't say it, don't assume they believe you think that. And everyone's going to be like, well, we know what's right and wrong. Dude, when people are emotional, they're not thinking right and wrong. This guy that hit the strip club, right? Where was he going with that?
We know what right and wrong is, just a justification for it's uncomfortable to have that conversation, so I'm not going to have it. We've got to just be truthful with ourselves. And Tiffany, for what you were talking about, and to that comment, another healthy step that requires just some time with self is to sit down and make a list for yourself. Be honest with yourself today. If you're listening to this and there's some areas where you're like, man, I'd love my yeses to be yeses and to understand what my nos are. I made a note, define what matters most. So what are your non-negotiables for your health, your faith, your family, your rest, and your purpose? And that's a great place to start. And then make a list of what things drain me. And it could be social media and some of the stuff that you're absorbing. For me, it was. There were certain people I snooze, and it's not the person, it's the content that I'm allowing into my head. I'm just about what I'm for. And I'm about other people, helping people. I'm not about all these negative things, because there's plenty of negative things in the world. I'm about getting rest now because I'm getting older. And so I don't answer my phone after 8 o'clock. Those kind of things you'll start to be able to see and set outside of the harder boundaries are going to be in that intimate relationship. But you can start to set some in some other areas that get some health there.
Well, and just to counter Kellen's 8 o'clock boundary, you just continue to text. Just continue to text. Continue to just
conversation.
blast him, and then lie. Then say, dude, it's an emergency. It's an emergency. I'm just kidding.
Mimi talked about obligation and having an adult conversation, which brings me back to and Ashley talked about trauma. So you have a three-fer there that I think starts with the parents and the village that's helping to raise your children. You have to show them how to communicate. You have to show them how to be honest, and you have to show them what obligations they have in every relationship. Building relationships with their friends, building relationships with their
Well,
partners.
and boundaries for kids needs to be its own thing. Because I'll tell you right now, and I'll just say it like it is, my daughter wanted to get into some activities. And so my first step is to go and view the parents and the coaches there. And I viewed some coaches that still act like they're 13 years old. But my boundary for my daughter, because you are supposed to set healthy boundaries for your kids, which is another reason we have to know them for ourselves. I mean, how do we navigate that if we're not doing them for self? Is when adults are very talented, because a lot are, but they're not emotionally or mentally mature, I'm not going to put my kids in dedicated they're the leader, listen to them, time with those people. I shifted schools because of that too. And that's just a boundary I have for my kids.
That's a funny thing that you just brought up. And you guys are going to find me regularly melting down over my own issues here. And here is one. I've got a scenario. Let's just say it's someone else's and not mine for fun.
Well, that makes a lot of difference now.
It's 100%.
That's when he texts me after like 10 o'clock and he's like, let's just pretend it's 7.
Here's the deal. It's getting real, getting real in this stuff is a thing. So like you're talking about activities. Why in the world would you not place your child in an activity with a proven place, with a proven instructor versus one that's none of those things, except for the idea that you need to control it? So you've got two places. One's not better than the other, 100%. But I just don't want to let you do that because it would be you deciding. So instead, we're going to send them to an inferior place.
Well, and let's take this out of the context for what I see all the time. I see this in like every relationship, is when there's significant wounds in an adult, they're more than ever going to present themselves in a family dynamic because that's most of the time where they came from as a child. So now I'm an 8, 10, 12-year-old child operating in these triggers, and I'm allowing my triggers for what I declare is safe to control everything because that control saves everybody. And what I'm doing is I'm walking out and living a lie, and I'm passing down trauma onto the next generation. And that's a different topic. It revolves around boundaries and that we're using some of those terms inappropriately, but that's a different topic altogether in that it's the importance, like for all of us, the importance of really digging deep and getting real freedom and real hurt.
And I think setting boundaries for ourselves has become important. And I say this just because I'm learning about it, but you tell me this kind of all the time is you just can't control how other people are going to handle their issues. You can't control the nonsense that they post and say for other people's comfort levels and to present a certain way. The boundary you've got to set for yourself is just to understand that that person has their own issues and things that they've got to let play out, I guess, for them. And the boundary you've got to set for yourself is kind of ignoring.
Yeah, or the gift, and Bryan, you and I talk about this all the time, the gift that can be in other relationships struggles is that if it's pulling something super emotional out of us, it's something that we can go to a counselor or give to God and no longer have to walk in. Because the reality is, in every relationship, if somebody acts like that, it's going to pull that same emotion out. And there are people that don't take it personal. So there are people that have freedom in those areas. So that freedom's offered for us. We don't have to walk in that. Also say for the friend groups, we've had this happen. You've reached out to some people that have just gone through stuff, and we've communicated back and forth on maybe what I see, or more often, like I've invited my wife around some stuff. My wife's so far ahead of me in certain areas, especially in seeing things that God wants to do for people. But the communication back to you has been just a couple of suggestions for different groups, but it was not at you. It had nothing to do with you, right? And I think that's where things break down, especially for men. Like, welcome to Sports 101. You see something wrong, you call it, and you put the person's name there. Well, I can't get anywhere healthy for anybody. And so you want friends that have some wisdom, that choose their words and communication, that want to help you also see blind spots. We all have them. That's the coolest thing, too. I've got 2 guys in my life, and it started with one of them saying this, that I said anything that I do, send them a text, with my wife, out in public, that you see on social media, that shows you anything that's not for the betterment of the community, the people around me, myself, my wife, my kids, and what I'm going to do for the Lord. If you don't like any of it, you have my permission to communicate that to me immediately and exactly how it needs to be communicated. No offense, because I gave you authority to speak directly in my life because I need to know now. But that was my boundary for them. I want this. And so that just changed that, if that makes sense.
Well, we've got some people that we know that are in a, more so dating scenarios. And it's been pretty intentional conversations with a couple people recently to whereas, hey, when you start to see control being disguised as a boundary conversation, it's time to talk, because that's not going to turn out well. It doesn't even turn out well, Kellen, years later, when there has been inappropriate behavior, but we've moved into, we're going to lean in, and we're going to figure this out. 3 or 4 years later, that thing still ain't going to work. Sorry. Yeah, he did do the wrong thing, or she did do the wrong thing. She hurt you, he hurt you, but it's still never going to be a winning play for the relationship to control.
And just the brutal truth. Some things are simple. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. If I jump back into the same kind of relationship, I'm asking for the same result. And so I haven't taken enough time to get healing and be healthy for a relationship. That's all there is to that.
Yeah. Well, and what ends up happening with that is, if there has been correction, what you're going to start to see in a lot of cases from that other person who was wronged, they were wronged, is they're still going to start to assign the same action that's not even happening.
You know what we need to have a whole episode on, Thad, for single people? Because we don't have to go through it. Is like get into a relationship and keep all 4 feet on the floor for at least, like, I believe in no sex till marriage now. Didn't follow it, but until my last relationship. But 4 feet on the floor for 6 months, and you'll know who the person is. Like, there's so many relationships, and it all goes bad. And I have 100% batting average at this, at asking when they got physical, and it being like so far before 6 months, it's not even funny, right? Like week 2, and you're wondering why stuff's crazy.
We talked about this.
I was engaged in 9 months, brother. I was ready to go, dog. Like,
well, one of the reviews,
or once you know, go get it. I don't have a problem with that.
One of the reviews we got recently is actually an adult who I would consider to be very intelligent, had never heard the term soul ties. Yeah. And dude, there's no surprise with issues. I mean, a lot of this thing boils down to connections way early that you never should have had. I mean, almost every scenario I presented to you guys today is definitely rooted in physical activity, way past going up the old shirt, way past it, and early on. Not that it's okay
this is the basis conversation from when you're 12.
It's not okay to go up the old shirt. But what I'm trying to make clear is that we're well past. The other night we had this basis conversation. We had a basis conversation. Right? And it's fun, but there's realness to that, because, look, we're adults here. And when you start talking about single people that are adults, it's different conversation. Thad, you got married young. Maybe you're a virgin, whatever you were or weren't, but you were young, right? That is a different conversation than 40-year-old, newly single guy who's been in sexual relationships. It's been okay for most of his adult life. And now all of a sudden, you've got to reset and treat this thing like you're 18 or 19 again. It's important, but it's really hard to understand how important it is to do that. In these scenarios I'm talking about today, every single one, 100% of them, there was sex before marriage. There was sex early.
Before dating.
And no judgment to anyone involved. If people are sitting there listening to this going, hey, he's talking about me. Probably am. But I'm also talking about me. Okay? Sex too early creates emotions that are going to disguise anything healthy that can come out of the relationship.
Oh, 100%.
You start to get jealous. You start to get weird. You start to get needy and impulsive. You start to depend on things that aren't good.
Because you're a 13-year-old boy in a grown man's body at that point.
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of boundaries that can go with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
You allow him to go out and drink until he's just obliterated and has no idea what's happening, what kind of conversations he's coming home to, doesn't know how to communicate you when he gets there. You go from these types of boundaries to that type of boundary to there's just so much.
Yeah, relational boundaries are really, really important.
There's so many boundaries that you have to set in the beginning, just from the get-go. Is like I need 20 minutes in the car by myself.
Yeah, and it's for your own peace.
Yeah.
Well, and
for your own peace,
even dating somebody else, like you can be so attracted to somebody, and that when you're talking about, you said for your own peace, it is for your own peace.
Yeah.
But one of the boundaries is, hey, if I've been in these relationships, and I was too, by the way, that were highly sexual and too early, and I now know kind of what I want, but there's all these feelings still attached to certain people, then I need to go to a counselor. And I was going to a counselor. So now I've gotten some help, and I understand what the past just a flesh thing was, because again, we go back to the world says it's just sex. Well, no, it's not. We're all 40 and we're like, man, that screwed me up because it was deep, and I allow those things to be dealt with. Well, you know what I probably want in another person as we're dating and talking? One of the things that I'm looking for as my boundary in picking a partner is I want somebody that's done some soul searching and matured. If I find out dating, like not connecting, which is importance of not hooking up too quick because I don't know the person, that they haven't, they've had all these relationships and done nothing to dig in. For me, that's just my boundary. Nothing wrong with them, not on them. I just have already set that boundary for myself that's not what I'm getting in a relationship with.
Well, you have to have other things outside of that too. That's not the only thing that's involved in this relationship. There's so many other things.
To your sitting in the car
Which is weird.
There's real scenarios here.
Because Bryan gets, like, way back in the day, you start talking to your wife and just disappear off the face of the earth. The guys do that, right? You get back into ooey gooey time and, like, all the relationship stuff just stops.
If we're getting real, if you're getting real about that, we've talked about this. Sometimes people don't do that because they want to. Sometimes they do it because they think it's the only way to have peace. Some people are trapped. And I think why we have these conversations is for a lot of people, it's not as simple as just get in your car and leave because you're a man. I'm a man and I'm 40. That's not a lot of people's reality. And they're trying to navigate, hey, how do I not lose the rest of my week, but I still get to be an individual? Tiffany, to your topic about sitting in the car, you need that. Well, I'll tell you this. If you're in certain situations and you need it that time, but you didn't communicate that time to the other person, that looks like a time to where they got cheated on by someone who would sit in their car and text before they got inside.
Yeah.
Do you know what it looks like for someone to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night for someone that's been cheated on is that you must be in the bathroom looking at stuff you're not supposed to. These are these real issues to where it's like, well, just set a boundary. It's pretty tough when the other person's operating out of full emotion because you stand your ground. But this is why I said, get someone involved. Because if you don't get someone involved that can explain to both of you what's healthy and safe, because that's doing your part, is if I can't explain to you why this is healthy or not, will you listen to someone else?
Yeah, 100% agree. And it also allows you, again, we go back to the healthiness of a relationship for you to be the best you is you're not dealing with bitterness towards the other person. Because there's good things you see in another person regardless. And so if I go to a professional to realize what's really happening and how to set some boundaries, because this stuff is not what I've ever experienced before, I'm taking action. I'm not going to sit there and just go with it. To your point, what's crazy in relationships, and we do it all the time, I've done this. Because I have huge triggers in certain areas, and my wife has had huge triggers in certain areas. But I've actually told myself I won't have this conversation because the rest of my night won't go good. We don't, like anybody that's matured anywhere in business. I know Thad's even in this. We all are, and vice versa for our mate, right? But in business, if somebody else is gonna act weird one day, you're looking for the betterment of the business. You're looking for the betterment of the marriage. So the mature thing to do is to get the person's feedback or step out of the emotion and have the right conversation. So I'm not blindsided and running through a cycle because I'm only looking at short term. And I'm honestly being selfish because when I say I don't want my evening to feel this way, I'm operating out of selfishness, not leadership.
And I think there's a great point that's just been kind of bubbling up in my brain for the last few minutes is boundaries are about seeking peace and not about people pleasing. And so often people get put in a position of, I got to please people to have friends. I got to please people to have a relationship. But it's not for their own peace. And they're just trying to please people to feel acceptance. And healthy boundaries sometimes mean you're going to disappoint people. Just to stay true to yourself and true to your convictions and true to who you are, you're going to disappoint people. So we have to get out of the, I'm going to disappoint them, and this is more for my own mental health, my own welfare, my own relationship with the Lord. This is for me and not for them.
One of my favorite people in the world, my old admin named Lauren, she would just knock things out of the park and do them 100 times faster than me. Super sharp girl. I would come in excited and ask something, and she would just stop. And then one day I looked at her, and I'm like, hey, were you working on something important? She goes, yeah. And I said, and I just like threw it out the window. And she's like, to the other building. And I said, cool. I said, so for you, if I need some time, I need to probably call or schedule it, right? I said, next time I come in here and do that, I said, I need you to look at me and go, did you set up a meeting? Did you email me? I need you to get out of my office. And she did it like a week later, and I high-fived her. I mean, that's just, it's growth.
Before we take one more comment or question, I got a question about, it must be someone that's watching is why can't Kellen turn his head all the way when he's looking at me? So I'm going to address that for you guys. It's because his neck's so big. His neck's just so big. I don't know how else to answer that.
I got up early and did push-ups this morning, and I pulled a muscle in my top right or left of my back. This is actually success.
The beard is fluffy. The beard's fluffy. It's not a preventer. It's the neck is too large. So, Tiffany, is there any other comments or questions you think that we could volley for a second?
Ton of good stuff. Ashley is talking about.
Don't say any more of Ashley's. No more Ashley's.
Ashley's really her and me.
Ashley's been.
She's a favorite of yours right now.
Ashley's been kind of slamming it. I've been looking at the comments.
I apologize if anybody else said anything.
That means Mimi's not working.
Tiffany's
so
just
interesting.
Laser focused on feedback
Is there
from
any
Ashley.
others? Because I know Ashley will just.
Really good point. So you're talking about people would not isolate you from your tribe if they genuinely love you, care about you, cherish you, and have good boundaries with you.
Well, so right now some people are just making comments at me directly, which is fine.
20 years of that. We're good.
Bryan's a big target.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna dodge. We can go with that one. I'll agree with that. But that, guys, that goes all the way back to, and listen, we want everyone to understand. We're trying to present this with as much humility as possible. People are dealing with crazy stuff. We're guilty of crazy stuff at times. But what you just said, that last one, isolation, goes back to the original quote that I said, that people that disguise control as boundaries, but then react harshly when the same boundary is applied back to them, that's a red flag. And just like isolation would be, the crazy thing about very read up people is they know how to say words to you that make it sound like it's the right thing that they're placing on you.
Gaslighting you.
It's odd because, for instance, it's the scenario I gave you earlier is girl needs time, guy doesn't. So what he does is says, well, is family time not important? Wow. So now you're going to take and make something that you know is important to me and say it's not just because I need this other thing too. That's manipulation. But it's using the right words, because it's like, hey, if we were talking to a counselor, would you just act like family time wasn't important? No.
That goes back to, we talked about shame and cycles, and we also talked about really finding healthy men or women in front of us to talk to, that we can trust, that they don't point fingers either. Anybody that has maturity is not going to just really dislike somebody or use somebody else's name a lot. They're championing you for what you can do better and helping you see things and helping you with some of those boundaries or hard conversations. If you have those people in your life and you've been a victim, because you're a victim to something, but you're also a part of it. So the first healthy step is realize you're a part of it. Meet with those people. Let their life experience and their wisdom help guide you, and quit trying to walk through some of this stuff alone, because figuring this hard stuff out alone is brutal.
Well, we're definitely gonna probably get back into this. I told you the other night, I think it'd be cool to, bring Tara on sometime, maybe soon, and start to talk it through. And the cool thing, the way we can do that is we can give our perspective, and then if she needs to tighten it up, she can, because what's happening out in the world today is that's what people are doing. Like, this is how I feel, so then the words come out of my mouth. We need help. And I think it would probably prove our point to do that, just where someone could tie that up. We want to make sure everyone knows, you're going to find in the links, look in the links on your platform that you listen to. You're going to find links to not only our Facebook page, you're going to find the ability to give us a review there, which we need. The reviews is what help the content get distributed better. So give us your review. Also, we read those when we've actually used a lot of people's reviews over the course of our conversation to talk about topic. And so please do that. We're going to use it and we're going to talk about it. We may not name you, but we're going to discuss it.
Well, and the truth's welcome. We've had some people tighten some stuff up for us. Like we said, we're just going to jump into this, and so people that care enough about us or this or what we're doing to have candor and speak directly into it, it's a blessing to us.
Yeah. You're going to find that the links to the platforms are going to be always going to be in the Facebook page. We would love it if you would share that. You can share the whole post. You can copy and paste links out of it and post it. We love that. We need that to happen. We love the questions. Follow the page. Tell your friends to follow it. Tell your moms to follow it.
Subscribe on the favorite podcast apps.
Yeah.
Do all those
Subscribe
things.
on the platform you use. Right now we post them on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, iHeart. You can also see the version of the edited version on YouTube if you want to watch it, and then obviously on the Facebook Live. So
yeah, and I'll get some. I mean, again, shame is a big deal. What we covered last week is going to come out. It's a big deal, and so is this. And so we're not the experts. We know how to start the conversation. We're going to be truthful. We'll bring in some more resources, but we're also going to get those resources and provide some books and guides if this is important to your life.
Yeah, make a comment, send a message on the Facebook. We'll provide the resources that we're referring to that we would go to if we had questions and needed answers. I have a list of people that I would also offer as a resource as it pertains to like marriage counseling and things.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Just starting the
Yeah,
conversation.
Do your
send us a DM on
research.
that. Send
Do
us
your
a DM.
research and read. So I have absolutely no clue what we're going to talk about in the next one.
Anything else you need people to do?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
like a week's worth of work there.
Buy a hoodie, get a hat. We're going to come up with a topic for next time. Based on what we get from you guys too. I mean, that's what we're doing this for. This is not a conduit to tell you, hey, here's how you should live and here's what you need to do. It's a place to where it's like, hey, let's start talking about these things, and we may not know what we're talking about, but we're going to try.
Yeah.
And we're going to get the ball rolling. So
These are a lot of the conversations that are helping us at the time too.
Men, women, funkles, we want to know.
yeah, we appreciate you guys. And hey, don't forget to get canceled.
Don't forget.